Hello everyone, this is the great Lord and Master, Osiron, the Eternal, for a second video on the heels of the one I made yesterday. Yesterday I just released a video, the Tarot Pip Smackdown, and it would figure that after I released that video I figured out the secret of the planetary order. So I'm going to cover that today. What we see here is the full wheel of the Zodiac. You've seen a few other things. Now here is the axis of the Great Lord planetary order, the 3-6 axis planet order, and that starts out with Saturn, Jupiter, Mars, Venus, Mercury, the Moon, and then the Sun. And we see that here on the axis of the Great Lord, the 3-6 axis. It starts out with Saturn, Jupiter, Mars, Venus, Mercury, and then the Moon and the Sun cap it off, and the planets mirror on each side of that 3-6 axis. And real quickly, I realize I've covered this probably 1,000 times, but I like this. There's some key points I like to cover again and again. And one of them is how this 3-6 axis is derived. It's derived from the tarot cards that go there on the Osiron Tarot Spiral. The High Priestess and the Magus, card 1 and 2, form a 3 for that. It goes around, cards 7 and 8 form 15, that reduces to a 6, and that gives you the 3-6 axis. And then when it comes around again, the 4 cards that land in this house, in these two houses again, the Tower, Star, Moon, and the Sun form 7 directly. So that's how you get the 3-6 axis with the 7 connotation of the blood. After that. So that's how that axis comes to be, and the planets mirror each other on that axis. And now if you use that planetary order, it really makes the planetary significance come alive in a much better way. See, yesterday I was using the idea that Aries begins a year, and on the traditional planetary order, it begins with Mars, it goes around again, and ends with Mars. So I sort of equated that with the Saturn too. I figured, okay, well, if Aries, well, if this begins the whole thing, and it starts out with Mars being false, well, you just put Saturn there as well. And you begin it here, you begin Saturn here, you go around, and it ends with Saturn. Well, there is one spot in the zodiac wheel where it would make more sense to begin with Saturn and end with Saturn, and that just happens to be in the houses of Saturn. Right here, you got Capricorn and Aquarius. And this is the best place where you could start with Saturn because you're in Saturn, and it goes around again, and it finishes with Saturn in Saturn. So it's 100% congruent. And as we saw from the Spear of Destiny, in the cosmic phallus, the one that followed that, Saturn begins in Capricorn and it precesses around and it ends with Aquarius and Saturn again. So this is perfect. This is telling you that everything begins from Saturn. So when you begin the sequence of planets from the 3-6 axis with Saturn, it goes through the planets, and then the Sun makes its first appearance on the first decan of Aries. So the first time the Sun appears is in the first decan of Aries, where the Sun is born again anew for the new year. Okay? And the Sun is also exalted in Aries. But when it comes to the planetary exaltations, I haven't looked into that enough to figure out if that's BS or not. But the standard model is that the Sun is exalted in Aries. When you use this proper layout, the Sun makes its first appearance in Aries, and then it goes around again, and then Jupiter makes its appearance, not its first appearance, but Jupiter makes an appearance as it breaks from spring into summer. Jupiter is the first planet that breaks into the summer, and Jupiter is also exalted in Cancer too. So we see now 2 pretty significant correlations. We got the Sun breaking into Aries, and then Jupiter is a planet of bounty, of giving, of prosperity, and that's making it seen, the father of God, And Jupiter makes it seen here. Now, if you remember, actually this just came to mind right now. If you remember, these two houses down here form a 2 and a 7, and when you combine them, they form 9. Well, up here, these cards, when you combine them, card offhand, I can't think what they are, but they've combined to form a 13 and then reduced to a 4. So there's a 9 down here, and the 4 heads this up. Well, Jupiter is number 4. Jupiter is assigned with 4. 4 is Jupiter in the days of the week. Thursday is Jupiter. So we see this here. Then it goes around again, and then once we break into autumn, Venus heads up the charge, and Venus rules Libra anyway. So now we see this, and then it goes around again, and it breaks back into the womb or the winter again to start over. And the moon heads this up. And if you recall, the high priestess rightfully belongs in Capricorn as the archetypal feminine principle, the high priestess, and she is associated with the moon. So now we see the moon head this off. So when you use this, the planetary order that comes from the zodiac itself on the axis of the Great Lord, and you start where it belongs in Saturn, it tells you that. Saturn begins it and Saturn ends it, and it goes around. It really makes everything come alive in a much better way. Now, one more aspect. I think this is the only house that does this, but Venus shows up in every one of her houses. So Venus rules Taurus and Libra, okay? And Taurus is right here, and we see Venus in the cherubic deacon position, Venus. Then we go around to Libra. Venus starts out in the cardinal position, and the other house that is associated with Venus is Pisces. And Venus is exalted in Pisces, and Venus shows up again in the cardinal position of Pisces as well. And also in the tarot, in the sort of official tarot, the one that's presented to the masses, the moon card typically is shown to reside in Pisces. Well, the last card or the last planet to show up in Pisces is the moon. So now, was that a hint of the truth, or was that just a coincidence? Who knows? But so we're seeing a much better, much more proper demonstration of the planetary assignments when you use the axis of the Great Lord and begin with Saturn and loop it around. And also, one other thing about this, when you do this, Saturn is the only planet that shows up 6 times in the wheel. So Saturn is here, and it's times 6. Saturn is the only one that has 6 placements on the wheel. All the rest of the planets, which total 6 in number, only show up 5 times. And that gives you the heart of the tree and the jewel. So all of the planets besides Saturn are 6 in total, which is the heart of the jewel, and they appear 5 times, which is the heart of the true tree. And we see this over here. 36 divided by 7 equals 5.14. And it's showing that all of these planets show up 5 times, except for Saturn, which shows up 6. But so 5.14, now there's a bunch of ways you can look at that. You could say that's close enough to just call it even 5, or you could say it's 5.1, and then when you add 5 plus 1, that equals 6. Or you could say the 5.14 is like 2 5s. So there's a bunch of ways you can look at that, but that's interesting. And this is also the heart of the true tree, and the pentagram, and the word itself, 5, is very similar to phi, and we know that 5 is a very, very important number in occult circles. And it's funny how in the occult presentations that have been handed down to us, Saturn is almost always presented in a very negative light, and so isn't the number 5. See, in the tarot, every 5 card in the tarot pips at least, every 5 cards in the Tarot Pips is a very negative card. Regardless of what planet goes there. It doesn't really matter what planet falls in there. It's just 5 is associated with a very negative card. Well, is this a sign of occult shenanigans? I think it is. Because Saturn, as we've seen over and over again, Saturn isn't this evil monster masculine god. It's actually a feminine goddess, and it's the source of everything, as we see as it shows up in the Zodiac. And as I covered in the video yesterday, there's actually a lot of real reasons why Saturn is revered as a god or goddess in this, in our cosmology and the origins of humans. Because in that cosmology I laid out in the video, one thing I forgot to mention is that human beings aren't native to this planet. And there's a lot of theories that suggest why that is. But one of them in that theory is that we actually were we were actually from one of the planets that was in the Sun's solar system on a moon of Jupiter, is the postulation. I can't think of the exact planet that it is, but the speculation is that one of Jupiter's moons was actually habitable, and we actually came from there. And for some reason, we ended up coming to Earth to inhabit Earth at some point in the evolution of the cosmology. And Mars, also shows signs of habitation. Now, one of the reasons Saturn could have a bad light, because as I mentioned yesterday, it's Saturn, the purple dawn theory. One of the problems with that scenario is that every now and then the brown dwarf star that was Saturn would flare up angrily and wipe out everything. You know what I mean? And that is what some people think happened to Mars, is that Mars was inhabited, and then at some point the brown dwarf sun that was Saturn flared up and it wiped out Mars. And then, it either spared the people on Earth or the people moved to Earth or whatever happened. But so that could be one of the reasons why Saturn is regarded in a bad light like that. Or that could also be another reason why the Kali Yuga is associated, or Kali is associated with death and destruction, because, well, the Saturn goddess flares up every now and then and destroys everything in her wrath. And that, so there's a lot going on with that purple dawn theory. But yeah, so this is a quick video. I just wanted to show you that the planetary zodiac order, it looks like it's been solved, because when you use it in the proper way, it works out much, much better, using the axis of the Great Lord as its demarc point for Saturn to begin, to go around, and then end with Saturn. But one quick thing I want to just illustrate to show is that I mentioned yesterday on the video that that the only planets that have a fully masculine aspect are Jupiter and Mercury. And you can see that here on the axis of the Great Lord, or the Staff of Hermes, when you apply the court cards. See, the positive negative are the association with the planet with its positive masculine aspect and its feminine. And the P's are the princes, and that means cherubic. But we see here that Jupiter, on one of its aspects, has a completely masculine presentation without any feminine. And the only other one to do that is up here with Mercury, with a positive aspect and then a king to go with that. And then the only other two planets to have a completely feminine aspect is Saturn with Capricorn, and also the Moon with Cancer has a completely feminine. Capricorn has a completely feminine. Jupiter has a completely masculine, and Mercury has a completely masculine. And we see this here when you break this down. Only one planet here is not a cherubic, that's Jupiter, and it's completely masculine. Over here, these two planets don't have a cherubic face, and that is Mercury, which is the other completely masculine, and then the feminine, the Moon, which is completely feminine. So this is that. So thank you, and namaste.